All right, let's get into it. So it's a 2-3-10. Usually it's generally 2-3, but it's kind of end of the night. So like four or five of the 2-3 tables kind of converge into one table. So it's playing a little bit larger than usual. And generally just kind of 2-3.
Okay.
So I think some people may not understand proper bet sizes playing a little bit bigger. But anyways, we're at $3,300 effective.
Where's this played out, by the way?
There, this is in St. Charles. It's the Mayor Star in St. Louis, actually.
Oh, okay.
It's actually
I've
where
played there.
Mark Goon got his feet wet, if I'm correct.
Yep, I've played there before. St. Louis,
Yep.
St. Charles. Okay.
So we have the under the gun straddle,
Okay.
and then under gun +1 opens at 35. Next player calls. Low jack
Okay.
calls. Hijack calls. So basically, everyone's calling once the first person calls.
Uh-huh.
One of those situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the cutoff, who is a competent player, raises 3 bets to 145.
Okay.
And then hero is in the bun,
Mm-hmm.
who 4 bets to 535 with ace 5 of diamonds.
So straddle to 10, +1 to 35. I guess you could say +2 calls. Then you get two more
Yep,
callers. Cut off 3 bets to 145, who you think might be a competent player.
correct.
Hero
Yes,
Hero 4 bets with ace 5 of diamonds to 535. I assume you're 3,300 effective with the guy who 3 bet.
the cutoff. The cutoff.
Okay.
Correct.
So you have
Yes.
some stack depth, right?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
other guys are differing from say
Right.
600 to
Right.
1,500, whatever. You know.
So you take about a 3-ish X sizing in position. And
Correct.
I assume that if you think the cutoff might be just sort of squeezing here, it's kind of a small squeeze size from the cutoff. 35
That
call,
that was
call,
my
call.
first thought, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if he went like
Like
even 3X times the dead callers, I mean, that would be what? 3X would be what? 100, 135. I mean, it should be at least to like 200. If you went 4X, it would be like 250. It's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, my first thought process when I saw it was like, if it was me, I would do at least 185, 195, 200 at minimum, you know.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thrown off by it, you know. So I thought he was maybe kind of weak.
I
Um,
mean, I don't mind the play. Like I said, I don't mind the play because if you sort of think that he's picking up on the dead money. Here's the thing too, like just on the sheer face of it, we don't usually talk about MDF in pre-flop scenarios, but 35 call, 70, 140.
I
There's
had about 300 with the cutoff raise basically at
right,
that
so you're
point.
risking
Yeah.
535 to win 300 immediately. So you're not even risking necessarily twice your money. So, if you risk the pot, it would be like 50%. If you risk double the pot, it would be like it's got to work 66%. You're probably somewhere around the low 60s that this would have to work off of immediately. And then, of course, you have a decent hand, with the ace 5 suited in position. So I don't mind the play.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it folds around to the hijack, who James 725 total. So
So the hijack back
basically
raises all in.
just a little bit over. Correct. Yes.
And this is crazy because, and it's not that this is so unusual, but it's almost like he can never really have a strong hand here because it went 35 +2 called, low jack called. So he's like the second overcaller, right? And
Yeah. So my first thought. Yeah. Sorry. Keep going.
no, I was just gonna say usually this is gonna be like maybe like sevens, eights, nines that just decides to go with it. I feel like that's what I would think.
That's what I thought. I thought kind of like eights, maybe jacks that know how to play it, or maybe like some ace king offsuit that doesn't know what he's doing. You know. So
That didn't squeeze
that's what
initially.
that. Yeah, that was my first thought. You know, he just said, "Oh my gosh, there's so much money. Let me just jam at this point." I don't know.
Right. So he goes to 720. Is that what you said?
725,
Okay. And then what happens?
and then the cutoff flats.
The cutoff was the initial 3 better flats.
Correct. Yes. So right away, I'm thinking this guy's range is actually pretty close to the hijack's range. Probably eliminate ace king for the most part, I would think. It's gonna be like nines, ten, jacks, and maybe queen. You
Well,
know.
the strange part of this is that the cutoff has it doesn't matter that the hijack back raises all in for less and not making it a full raise, because the cutoff always going to have the option. And sometimes people get a little confused here. The cutoff always has the option to re-raise here because because you are the one that re-raised, right? So he's not shut out. Now it's you that don't have the option, it looks like, to jam back over the top because you raised
Correct.
390. You can only call. But the cutoff could have put in, I guess, would have been a 5-bet here, right? So I get on board with what you're saying. It's like, unless he's just pure trapping with like aces, which of course you block, or he's just super scared with like kings or queens, he would be incentivized to put in an extra bet, although there's probably not a whole lot of 4-betting going on in live poker, so he might be stronger than you think. Now, obviously, getting back to you only have one option, right? Getting a bunch of pot odds.
Yeah, I agree. Although at the time though, I didn't really think of it, right? I was like, man, should I jam to force him out or should I flat? But at the time though, right now though, I'm like, oh crap, I could only call,
You couldn't
right?
jam. You couldn't jam, right?
No, I know, I understand that, but
Yeah.
if I could jam, is it worth it in your opinion?
Uh, if you don't think that the guy is sophisticated enough where he's trapping you, it probably would be, because there's so much dead
Yeah.
money out there. Like if you can get him out of the hand, say for example, for whatever reason the betting was opening back up to you, there's already 1,500 from them plus all the dead callers, like 16 or 1,700 plus the money that you put in. It's probably like 2,000 in dead money from the first guy that back jammed, this guy who called, your money as a 4-bet, and then the other caller. So if you can get him out of the pot, I mean, that's insane, because you're really only risking five. If you get him to fold, you're risking 535, or excuse me, you're risking 725 to win 2,000. If you can drive him out of the pot, right? With ace 5 suited. So, but, once in a while you're up against somebody who's tricky and is doing this so that you kind of rejam, back over the
Yeah.
top.
Like I said, he was a competent player, so when he flats though, I really think his range is basically nines through jacks, maybe queen queen, and maybe ace king, but I really discount that.
I mean,
Maybe
it
ace
could
king
it,
offsuit.
it could be, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes people will show up with some strong hands. Anyway, so it looks like the pot's like between 22 and 2,300,
Yeah,
something like
so I
that.
have the flop at 2280 basically.
Okay,
That's the
so
main pot. So we're
yeah,
gonna go to a dry side pot here,
all
right?
right. So 2280, you've got a guy all in from the hijack who's back jammed pre-flop, right? We don't think he's probably that. We don't think he's really probably that strong. But now, now you've got about 2,600 left on the side between you and this other guy, right?
Yeah, it's about 2600, give or
Yeah.
take a little bit,
People saying that it would be again, my point is about the back jam. If we didn't think the hijack was strong, and I'm not saying that it's not, I'm just telling the caller he's actually getting a really good price if he can drive the hijack out, because he's only putting in 735 to win like 2,000, basically, somewhere around there. So, anyways, okay.
So the flop comes four spades,
Mm-hmm.
six of diamonds, and then the eight of spades. So we basically have a gut shot to the seven with a backdoor flush draw.
Okay.
And then the cutoff checks.
And we are in a dry side pot. There is no money in the side.
Correct.
Yep.
It's a 100% dry side pot.
Uh-huh.
So my next question is we kind of went back and forth a little bit on Discord. This hand was if I should bet this flop or not. And I think personally, at least with my hand and all over pairs, it's a 100% bet. But I'm trying to ask your opinion on it.
Well, the reasons for betting here would be to fold out better ace high hands. Because if you just check it all the way down, you need to beat the hijack. So if he has like ace king, ace queen, you're not going to be able
Correct.
to win against
Yes.
that. So that would be the reason to do that. I mean, I guess, but again, you still have to beat though the hijack. So the times to do that would be if, I suppose, the hijack had a pair and the other guy had a better ace high. I don't know, because you still got to beat the hijack, though. That's the thing. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, yeah, you want to bet off the better ace high, but the hijack's still always going to showdown value, right? So the only time to really clean up, like, ace queen here would be if somehow, like, you hit an ace later on. But the cutoff's going to have overpairs here, too, that he's not going to fold. So I, in these spots, I've never seen I don't know if I've ever seen any work, quote unquote, on these spots simmed where people would be like, oh, it's a range bet 100%, right? Like, it's odd because you still have to beat the other guy in the hand. So I don't know if I'd be putting money in here unless, I mean, somebody could say, well, yeah, well, what about if you run a triple barrel where if the guy calls, you're just going to continue to barrel money and win on the side to get him to fold because you look so strong?
See, with the stack sizes, I don't know if this is necessarily triple barrel. I think it's maybe more of a double barrel as I bet, and then just jam the turn. At least most clean turns. I think if I check the flop, I basically don't have aces, kings, or queens at this point. Like, I think the cutoff's pretty capped at tens, nines, tens, jacks, queens at this point. But I can represent all the overpairs. And like I said, this guy seems kind of confident. I've seen him make a couple of good folds before. So I think he recognizes that I can.
But Ryan, I think you're missing one big point that a lot of the people in chatters are sort of pointing out is that, well, not only are you risking money to win nothing right now because there's no money in the side pot, right? It's that you still have to beat the guy in the hijack. So it doesn't really matter what you represent. The only time that betting that guy off of a dry side bot would be proper is if somehow you could beat the hijack unimproved somehow and win with like a worse ace high or a worse hand than the other guy that's in the hand. That can sometimes happen in these situations, but it's never going to really happen on a pre-flop situation. It can sometimes happen in spots where somebody's all in, somebody has like check jammed all in, and you think that there's a fair chance that they might have a draw, and you have some sort of medium strength hand that you don't know is good that would benefit from you getting the other player out of the hand so that you can beat the all-in player unimproved. The issue that I have with your specific hand here is I can't come up with that scenario where driving one guy out of the hand, this guy with all the money on the side, is really going to do anything for you. And it can be a negative if you bet and he calls, because now you're just putting in money bad. You see what I'm saying?
That makes sense. I didn't really think of that at the time. But I do understand where you're coming from looking back at it now. So that does make sense.
So anyways, okay, so it sounds like you bet, right?
Yes, I bet 8-15, and the cutoff tanks for about a minute or so, and eventually does call.
8-15, wow. I mean, the other thing too is like, if you were trying to like fold out ace king, ace queen here with a guy all in, I bet you can get away with betting like 400 here. Honestly, like 400 or 500. Look how like strong that. Like I think you could bet a lot smaller to get ace king, ace queen to fold. I mean, what are you trying to accomplish with this bet? Just tell me what do you think you're trying to accomplish with this bet here? Like, what is the purpose of the bet?
Once I saw the flop, I realized I had some equity with at least a 7 to some back doors, and as well as I guess absolute pot size. Since I think the game's play is a little bit bigger for most people than you're used to. I basically represented all the aces and kings in the world. So if I raised a 5-25 and then I bet 8-15, I'm basically saying, hey, I have aces or kings.
All right, so you're trying to get like nines, tens, and jacks to fold.
Correct.
Okay. So that's fine. But here's the other problem though, right? Let's say those hands fold. You still have to beat the hijack. That's the whole issue with shaping it this way, right?
No, I agree. I mean, the way you say it now, it makes sense. But in the moment, though, I wasn't really necessarily thinking of that. But no, you definitely are correct.
So, okay, so you bet 8-15. I think we all agree that that's very, very chunky large for what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he calls.
He does tank call after about a minute or so.
Wow. Well, I mean, cutoff's got to have like jacks or queens or kings or something, right? I mean,
Correct. Yes.
it's got to be, right? So now the pot's like
Yeah.
3880 ish, something
Yeah.
like that. It looks
Yeah.
like
So main pot 2280, side pot it's like 1630.
yep. Okay. So and you only have like maybe
I have
20.
1760 left,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then the turn comes the nine of diamonds.
So now you turn a diamond
The nut
draw
flush. Yeah.
with a 7 straight draw, right?
However, though, at the time, though, I was like, well, if he has tens, though, my seven could be dead. In theory.
And you said you have about
You know.
1700 left, something like that?
1760 is what it was. Yes.
1760. Well, this is interesting now because now there isn't the side pot's not dry. You know,
Correct. Yeah.
Now there's
Yes.
1600 in the side pot, so this starts to get a little bit complex. Where before it would make, if the side pot was 0 here, it would make absolutely no sense to move all in because you still have to beat the hijack. But now that you've got 1600, maybe not correctly though, in there, and the main's 22, you could make a case where if you jam here and you thought tens or jacks or queens or kings would fold, then you could make a case that you could have a bet in this particular spot. Although I got to tell you that when you bet so large on the flop for 800 and the guy calls, I don't know if he's releasing here. You know, you only have 17. The pot's going to be, I mean, both pots are going to be like 55, 17 to call. I don't know if he's check calling and then check folding jacks or queens now on the turn.
No, I agree with that. But once I see the nine of diamonds, though, even if jacks or queens and he calls off, I'm almost getting pretty close to direct odds on if I hit a diamond or a seven or even an ace. My ace is probably likely good, in my opinion.
You're getting direct odds on what?
So if I hit a diamond, so if I jam and he calls,
Uh-huh.
and I hit a seven, a diamond, or an ace,
Yeah.
the pot's me about 8,000. I'm probably getting pretty close with that draw, I would think, with all my outs.
Yeah, but you're not thinking about that the right way though, because look at this as like when I always talk about like when you decide to make a bet on the river when you're in position.
Mm-hmm.
The bet in itself is a bet into a dry. I forget about the fact that there's a dry side pot in this hand. I don't want to confuse things. In a regular hand, when it gets checked to you on the river, when you're trying to figure out whether or not you're going to bet or not, if you bet, it's like you're betting into a dry side pot because you can just check behind on the river and win or lose. But when you're betting, the guy has to call for you to win that amount of money. So in this particular case, you can check and it costs you nothing. You see what I'm saying? So there's no odds here that you're getting based upon your draw because the bet is 1-to-1 on the whatever you bet here, you're only getting 1-to-1. It's not, you don't look at the entire pot size. You're getting 1-to-1 on the bet because you're basically betting into 0. When you could check and have the same action, you're betting like a coin flip, like 1-to-1. You're betting into 0 on this street. So if you have the option to check behind, when you bet here, if you were betting for value, when called, you would need to be called by worse more than 50% of the time. So because I think you're confusing things a little bit with draws and pot sizes. Now, again, here you have some fold equity possibly where you could win the 1600 on itself, but I just want to clear that part up because that's a mistake that I've heard from not just you or some other people too, where they're like, well, I can give myself like 1-to-3, like I can bet 500 into 2,000 here, and I'm going to have 25% equity, so isn't it a profitable bet? No, you're not calling, you're betting. You could check. The bet is only getting 1-to-1 when you make it. So anyways, okay, so the turn's a 9 of diamonds, and
the cutoff tank checks after like a minute, just kind of same like he did on the flop. And then at this point, if I'm still going to rep all my overpairs, like I kind of said before, I think my only bet is to basically jam. So I do jam for 1780.
Okay.
And then the cutoff eventually folds.
Wow. Well, before you do a reveal here, I mean, somebody probably, you can't do this in real time. It would actually be quite complex, but there's probably some sort of mathematical formula here where you could figure out how often the cutoff has to fold here to make this a profitable jam. Now, if the side pot was 0, it would never be a profitable jam if we're assuming that the hijack always has better than ace 5. But because there's 1,600 in dead money, it's kind of like it's a semi-bluff, right? Like if you're going to win 1,600 some of the time, and then you add to, when called, your equity in the hand, plus the complicated part would be you always have to show your hand down, right? Because in the main pot, if the main pot's 2280, if the hijack always has better than ace 5, then you can't really be more than a 40%. You can't have more than 40% equity in that spot. So you only have 40% equity in the main. Then the question becomes, what's your fold equity on the side to make this a profitable play? Anyway, so you get the cutoff to fold, right? Cutoff folds. Is that what you said? Cutoff folds, right?
Yep.
Yep. Cutoff folds. Okay.
That's correct. Yes. Uh-huh. And the river is the king of hearts, so I completely break out.
Yep.
So the hijack, kind of like we said, he's got pocket tens.
Yep.
Which is not really a surprise by us.
Uh-huh.
And then the cutoff is immediately all mad, saying he would have won the entire pot, but he doesn't really say what he had. So I think it's kind of pocket jacks or pocket queens, in my opinion. You know.
Yeah, you don't think he was putting on an act, right?
I mean, he could have been. He seemed actually genuinely upset. So I guess I think it's probably pocket jacks or pocket queens, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of another hand that if he had like king, queen of spades, king X of spades, but I think at that point though,
he's probably got close.
He probably
to
has to.
odds.
Yeah, he probably has to call because no one's got like straights and stuff. The way that the hand went down, he's getting like almost 3 to 1.
I mean, the only other thing you could have is like if you could have like ace king that just Hollywooded just for no reason and then folded, because you see guys do that every now and then. But
it's possible. It's possible. Well, I think it's interesting because it brings up a concept that people haven't really examined all that much in training, which is how do these mathematical things shift when there becomes a side pot? Because I think, as the chatters agree with me, I don't like your flop bet because there was no side pot. You talked about that before. But then once you build the side pot up, then it's like now you have to beat somebody that you're not ahead of right now, but does the dead money on the side make it worth it to try to win 100% of it? And then you've got a function of how often is the guy folding a hand that he gets to after he calls your 800 on the flop. So, interesting.
Yeah, that's fair. At the time, though, I just thought ace, like if I had ace or kings, I would definitely bet that flop because I know the cutoff would always have basically over pairs, say tens, jacks, queens, or whatever. So I thought, hey, I need to keep going. Basically, keep betting to act like I have aces or kings was my thought process.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if I had queens there and I was the cutoff, it would be a very, very hard call to make. Jacks too, right? I mean, it would be a very, very hard call to make when you go 800 all in, and then again, it's one of these things where the pot is protected. So I would have been like, "Why are you betting on the flop?" And I would have been pissed too if I was the guy.
No, but I don't blame you. And maybe I took an unconventional line, but I just thought, hey, cut off someone good. He knows I can have aces and kings here, especially absolute sizing. Let me just go with it. So I guess it worked out. But I won $90, so that's good for me.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the call,
Bart.
Ryan. Appreciate it.